I would say, it's 11 o'clock, Roger. I don't know if we want to give it just one more minute to let some people trickle in.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking here. Maybe 30 seconds here. I noticed there's some folks just joining us there. We've got 6 attendees.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone. We'll get started here in about 20 seconds. As soon as we get the PowerPoint up in front of everyone. Looks good, Tony. Okay, Tony, are you ready to move forward with the PowerPoint?
All set.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here for the Oregon Department of Energy's listening session on our application to the U.S. Department of Energy's EECBG program. And I'll get this straight just right away. EECBG stands for Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. It's on the bottom of the first slide that you might see there. My name is Roger Kainu. I'm the Regional Solutions Representative and Analyst for the Oregon Department of Energy. I will be the program lead for this grant opportunity. Today's meeting is to specifically discuss a program created in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act under Section 40552. This webinar and listening session covers our potential approach to this program, for which we seek input and feedback. It also covers state allocations, allowable uses of the funds, and grant requirements. Because of the format of this webinar and the number of people in attendance, we have everyone muted currently. But as we go through the presentation, we'll pause for questions, and at that point, people can raise their hands and we'll be able to unmute you to ask questions. We'd also encourage you to use the chat function to ask questions. At the end, we'll have dedicated time for further questions and public comments. In addition to responding during this webinar, you can also enter your thoughts and feedback through an online portal that we've set if you would like more space to respond or more time to consider your responses. The link to the portal is in the chat and will be open through the end of this week. At this point, I'd like to ask everyone, including the ODO staff on the line, to introduce yourself through the chat. Please say your name and if there is an organization you're affiliated with. So if you could just take a moment and go to the chat, enter your name and the organization you're affiliated with. I'll continue on with some brief introductions of how to use WebEx. For those of you that may not have used this virtual meeting device. For those that are new to WebEx, here is a quick guide on how to use some of the features. As I mentioned before, attendees are off camera and muted, but our host will unmute you if we call on you to ask a question. You can see the option to raise your hand on the right-hand side of the screen under the participants panel if you click near your name. There's also an option at the bottom of your screen where you can see a virtual of a hand in the reactions bar. Feel free to use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. Please send to all panelists or to everyone so that all the ODO staff can see it and help respond. We'll try to get as many questions in the chat and through raised hands, but we may not have time for all of them today. Some people may have called in on the phone. You can press *6 to raise your hand and *3 to unmute yourself when we call on you and the host unmutes you from our end. I want to make sure you know that today's hearing is being recorded and that a list of attendees will be posted on our website later today. Next slide to the agenda.
Sorry, it's not letting me do anything. Give me just a sec.
Sure.
Apologies for this.
No worries. We have a little bit of time, so we're okay, Tony.
Everything just completely froze, sorry.
We'll go about it, and I'll just keep on going. I'm on the agenda slide right now. I'll just keep moving because I think I can just talk through this, and that'll be just fine. We have a lot to get through today. Here is the agenda, as you can see, as you can't see on the screen. The first part of today's meeting is going to focus on the EECBG funding opportunity through the IIJA, the way that Congress and the US DOE structured the program, and the requirements for ODO on behalf of the state to submit an application. My colleague Emily Salmeri, who is our new federal grants officer, will be leading this part of the presentation. The second part will be information about the state's approach. I will be speaking about the specifics of Oregon's potential program. Finally, we'll look for all of your feedback on the state's approach. We'll stop and ask questions during the presentation, but please know that many of your questions may be answered as we go through the material. My colleague Stacy is our host today and will be helping keep an eye out for those questions as well. While Tony's still working to get the slides to move forward, I'm going to speak a little bit about what the Oregon Department of Energy does. Some of you may be new to an understanding that the state even actually has an Oregon Department of Energy. I personally do a lot of outreach, and people are oftentimes surprised at the function of the Department of Energy, and we would just really like to clear that up so we can assist you. There's lots that the ODO, we affectionately call it, Department of Energy, can do to help you in your local community. So before we jump into any further discussion, a quick introduction to the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO as you might hear us referred to. On the slide that you'll see here in a little while, you'll be able to see our mission statement and what we do. Our mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient, affordable energy system. A lot is said in that sentence. We advance solutions to shape an equitable clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and the impacts for current and future generations. Under what we do, you'll see the services we provide and how we achieve our mission. The funding opportunity we're discussing today will help ODO support a resilient and affordable energy system as well as an equitable clean energy transition. No luck yet with the slide deck, huh?
No, it completely froze and crashed. Sorry, just sorry.
I'm wondering if maybe Stacy wouldn't be able to put it up for us. We'll pause for just a moment here, folks. Technical difficulties.
Is that him now?
Yep, we have it now. So Tony, if you can advance down to what is the Oregon Department of Energy at slide number 4. There you go. All right, everybody. Oh, there we go.
Apologies.
This is what I was just discussing with you, the mission and what we do at the Oregon Department of Energy. You can see on the bottom section there, we're a central repository of energy data, information, and analysis. In fact, we build a very large report. It's called the Biennial Energy Report. Every 2 years, we put this report together, and it's been really well received by the public. If you need a copy of that, put that in the chat, and we'll make sure you get one. But we do a lot of regulation and oversight. We have several different divisions. Siting, they're responsible for the regulation of new generation facilities within the state. There's also a division that is involved in Hanford and the control of waste products that come out of Hanford, kind of protecting the state. And most of us on this call are centered around our energy efficiency and conservation team. So we do a lot of outreach and, in this case, announcement of funding opportunities. Next slide, Tony. I'm hoping you can do it.
No, we got it.
There you go. Okay, so we want to talk about the objectives for today's webinar. I've already briefly talked about some of them. There's 3 key objectives for our time together today. First, we want to make sure that you understand how this EECBG funding works and the parameters that ODO has to work within when designing the state's program. This is a huge opportunity to bring federal dollars to Oregon to help fund energy efficiency strategies and programs across the state. Second, we want to share with you our potential approach for this funding and what we're considering putting in our application to the US DOE. We do want to hear from you on the program design and application and get your ideas for how to improve it today. Remember, the draft proposal we're sharing with you today is just that, a draft. We want input and feedback to make it better, to align with the work already being done and or planned by small cities and counties, and to better meet the objectives outlined in the federal funding opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, we will have time for verbal public comment at the end, and we also hope that people will submit written comments through our online portal if you don't want to speak right now, or if you have more to say. Next slide, Tony. Perfect. And now I'd like to introduce to you Emily Salmary. She's our official person is brand new to the organization, doing a fantastic job. She's a grants officer working with one other person, and it's amazing to me that this person can get as much done as she does. She'll be able to share more information on the federal bill that created this opportunity. Take it away, Emily, if you're ready.
Thanks, Roger. That was way too kind and generous. But hi, everybody. I am Emily Salmary, as Roger said. I am brand new to ODO about 2 months ago, and working on a couple of grants here, of course, one of them being EECBG, which we're talking about today. I want to start out by giving you just a little bit of background on where this funding came from, which, as some of you may know, is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This piece of legislation includes $62 billion for the U.S. Department of Energy to deliver a more equitable, clean energy future for American people by investing in American manufacturing and workers, expanding access to energy efficiency and clean energy for families, communities, and businesses, delivering reliable, clean, and affordable power to more Americans, and building the technologies of tomorrow through clean energy demonstrations. Additionally, this program, like other federal energy programs, is covered by the Justice 40 initiative. This federal initiative directs that 40% of the benefits should flow to disadvantaged communities. All right, next slide, please. We should be on slide 7. There we go. Perfect. Oop. Thanks, Tony. All right, so just a little bit about our guiding principles here. After the passage of both the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act at the end of 2021 and the Inflation Reduction Act last summer, ODO recognized that the state would be receiving millions of dollars from the federal government to invest in clean energy, energy efficiency, and resilience, among other important priorities. Through a series of public webinars and discussions with our Energy Advisory Work Group and other interested parties, we developed the principles that you see on this slide to help guide our approach to the federal funding. I won't read through all of these, but as you can see, we will consider equity at every step, including geographic diversity. We want to make sure that the benefits of this funding make it to the Oregonians who need it most and are distributed equitably around the state. In designing programs and distributing funding, we'll coordinate with tribal governments as much as possible and communicate clearly, inclusively, and efficiently to ensure stakeholders and the public are informed and supported. And where possible and internal resources allow, we hope to provide technical assistance to build community capacity and support grant recipients. There's a position funded in the governor's requested budget, to help with do just this. We're also working across agencies to leverage expertise and support historically underinvested work to further energy and climate goals and to provide other community benefits. And then finally, we'll try to take advantage of high priority funding opportunities while ensuring quality work that puts every available dollar to its best use. These are the principles we'll try to apply across all federal funds where practicable as we think about program design and implementation, and hopefully you'll see that the program we're discussing today is aligned. Next slide, please. All right, so in regards to EECBG formula grants in particular, the purpose of the funds as outlined by the U.S. Department of Energy is to reduce fossil fuel emissions in a manner that is environmentally sustainable and maximizes benefits to communities, reduces their total energy use, as well as improves energy efficiency in transportation, building, and other sectors. Next slide, please. All right, so the application is due to US DOE in July of this year. So July 31st, 2023, the full application is due. The application is currently in development. We're first required to submit our pre-award information sheet to the Department of Energy by the end of this week, which we already have in process, and then the full application later this summer. The Department of Energy is the state agency that will apply for, receive, and administer these funds. Next slide, please. A little bit about the eligibility here for these grants. Under this program, states, tribes, territories, and our state's largest local cities and counties will apply directly to the federal government. Those large local governments have already been identified, and they can be found in the ALRD from the Department of Energy if you're interested in who those local governments would have been. Once awarded, Oregon is required to run processes to issue at least 60% of the funds as subawards to eligible entities. In terms of those eligible entities, we're looking at local governments who are not eligible for direct awards from the U.S. Department of Energy, and they'll be eligible for a subaward from the state, as well as governments with a shared project applying as a consortium. Next slide, please. All right, so the legislation provides a one-time formula-based allocation to each state. Oregon's allocation is a little less than 2 million. You can see the exact number on the slide there. While 2% or $8.8 million of this funding was set aside for a separate competitive grant process for smaller local governments, the recently released funding opportunity announcement shared that these awards would prioritize communities in the least populous states, of which Oregon is unfortunately not included. I think they were specifically looking at states with 2 million people or less. While communities from more popular states like Oregon are still able to apply for these competitive funds, it is recommended that the entities that are seriously considering an eligible project to apply for a state subaward. Additionally, there is no match requirement for this grant. Next slide, please. All right, and you'll see a lot of different eligible activities on the screen here. While I won't read through the entire list, some of the eligible activities permitted under this award are development and implementation of an energy efficiency and conservation strategy, retaining technical consultant services to assist the eligible entity in the development of such a strategy, conducting residential and commercial building energy audits, establishment of financial incentive programs for energy efficiency improvements, the provision of grants to nonprofit organizations and governmental agencies for the purpose of performing energy efficiency retrofits, development and implementation of energy efficiency and conservation programs for buildings and facilities within the jurisdiction of the eligible entity, development and implementation of programs to conserve energy used in transportation, development and implementation of building codes and inspection services to provide building energy efficiency, application and implementation of energy distribution technologies that significantly increase energy efficiency, and many more. And while there are many activities that qualify under this program, there are just a few that are explicitly unallowable, such as the purchasing of new land and new construction of a building or facility. Next slide, please.
Hey, Emily, we have a quick question in the chat about the pre-award info sheet. Does that need to be submitted by applicants by April 28th, or is that when Odo will have the pre-award sheet put together to distribute out instead of and out to interested parties?
Great question. Thanks, Angela. That pre-award sheet is filled out by the state. And in fact, we have it pretty much already ready to submit, just needs a couple of signatures. So nothing that anybody else at this point needs to worry about. All right, so here are a few of the federal requirements for these projects, and these are pretty typical requirements that are coming through on the IIJA funds as well as the IRA funds. They come with requirements that apply to the project as a whole. So when we say that, that means that even if a portion or a partial amount of the funding comes from the EECBG funding or other IIJA funding, these stipulations do require you to follow the whole project will have to follow along these requirements. Some of these provisions that potential subrecipients may want to familiarize themselves with are here. Highlights include the Davis-Bacon Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and Build America, Buy America. Next slide, please. All right, and I'm going to hand it back to Roger.
Thanks, Emily. So as you view this slide, here are the project priorities of the proposed EECBG program that we've put together. Do these potential projects align with local government needs? What projects do communities have planned and have capacity for and need funding? You can see on this slide, we noted the home energy scores, EV charging stations, city lighting retrofits, and upgrades to municipal buildings. We thought those would be some projects that we could get over the goal line and that all of you, some of you, may be interested in. So consider those. Next slide, please. As Emily mentioned earlier, Oregon's formula allocation of funds is expected to be just shy of $2 million. The funding requires that at least 60% of the funds are made available as grants to eligible entities, with the remaining funds used to support program administration, information sharing, and technical assistance. We propose rounding that up to a minimum of 65% to exceed the federal compliance requirements and maximize community impact. Next slide, please. Here is a budget summary showing the carve-outs in terms of percentages as well as expected dollars. There's an estimated total budget of 1.9 million. Estimated subgrants budget, the 65%, would be 1.2 million. Proposed subgrant minimum budget, we're proposing 50,000, and a proposed subgrant maximum award of 100,000. This leaves us with an estimated number of subawards of anywhere between 12 and 25. Next slide, please. I like this interesting tool provided by the federal level. The federal requirements will also require us to demonstrate that at least 40% of funds support projects that bring benefits to disadvantaged communities. We propose using the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool made available from the White House. The areas shaded in gray on this map are census tracts identified as disadvantaged communities by the tool. Some of the darker gray areas indicate where tribal lands are located as well. You can see in the box the level of detail that you can observe from the tool if you zoom into Medford, Oregon, for example. We believe this mapping tool provides a simple means of demonstrating when a project serves a disadvantaged community, but we are also willing to consider other means. Next slide, Tony. We are proposing to make awards with a competitive grant program. Opportunity announcements will be posted for a minimum of 60 days and will include the application, prerequisites, a scoring matrix, a Q&A period, and the timeline for review and awards. At the end of each application period, ODO will confirm project eligibility and complete a competitive review. The process will conclude with a notice of awards and grant contracts. We recognize that federal grants can have a few extra strings attached, so we plan to develop resources to support attendees with compliance and reporting. Next slide, please. These are some of the metrics that ODO is considering to measure our progress toward these objectives. These metrics will be incorporated into grant performance agreements where applicable. We invite you to review these and comment on your ability to measure and report on these items. We particularly seek your feedback on these metrics to help us determine if there are more relevant data sets that we can help assess our success on this project. You can see some of these that we came up with are the reduction of fossil fuel emissions, reduction of total energy use, and the metrics behind that might be number of EV charging stations or the measured energy use reduction in buildings or equipment. There's ways to get at these metrics. We can help. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Next slide, Tony. So the ways to engage. Today is one of the many ways that you'll be able to engage with ODO on this proposal. This slide outlines ways to get and stay involved. You can submit comments on the online portal, although in terms of this draft application, please note that the timeline is pretty tight with a deadline of this Friday. You can submit an application and you can check out our job announcements and actually even come to work for ODO. Next slide, Tony. For our next steps, we intend to review public comments received to integrate into our application and program design. We will submit to US DOE no later than July 31st. Next slide, Tony. And now we've reached the time for your public comments. We appreciate the comments we've already seen in the chat and the questions that have arisen so far. Here's an opportunity to make a comment or ask a question. Please either use the chat or raise your hand so we can call on you to take you off mute. Also to remember that if you're on a phone, you can press *6 to raise your hand and *3 to unmute yourself when we call on you, and the host unmutes you from our end. Now that you have some understanding of the grant opportunity, please let us know what you think. We're particularly interested in knowing if you have plans to improve energy efficiency, but lack funding to implement. What are your thoughts on the minimum and maximum awards? And what about the subgrant process? Would you prefer to see a competitive process or a first come, first served style process? What else should we consider in designing our program? So if we can go to any questions or public comment, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, Roger, there is a question here from Tim at the Multnomah County Office of Sustainability. And they're wondering if we are anticipating a single award cycle or multiple for the subgrants.
Emily, I believe you'd be best to answer that. I think it's a single, right?
I'm happy to answer that. You know, given that this is a one-time funding opportunity that we know of, we intend for this to be a single award cycle. And in terms of the timeline, we have a 3-year reporting period. And because of the nature of timelines in terms of how by the time that we receive the funding award letter and we get these subgrants out to you all, we'd probably be looking at about a 2-year period of performance for our subgrantees to stay on track and on time. I hope that helps answer the question.
I'm not seeing, oh, yep, they said it did. Thank you. Yeah, not seeing any hands raised either. But yeah, feel free to keep writing stuff in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and we can unmute you as well. Oh, we got one more in the chat here from AJ at Falls City. Does reducing emissions include electrifying of municipal fleets?
I think that would qualify. It depends upon how you want to go about it, but I would definitely note it to us either in email or we'll have the chat here. but also we have the portal that you can enter any comments in that we can collect easily and consolidate from there. That's a good idea. Any other comments or questions, suggestions?
It looks like we have a couple of hand raised now. I think Natalie was first. Natalie Rogers. I'll go ahead and mute you. Go ahead. Oh.
Hey,
Natalie.
hear me? Okay.
I think we can barely hear you, Natalie.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha, Natalie.
Hey, Roger. Hey, everyone.
Hey.
How would things like resiliency projects, battery backup, solar arrays, etc., which ties to the decarbonization efforts, how would that kind of align with this block grant?
I think that would fit in just really well. I would submit that as a comment from Milwaukee, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
And we have another one from Julie Williams. I'll unmute you now. Go ahead.
From Corvallis. I'm curious if city government can access these funds to create a revolving loan system for low to middle income people to provide gap funding for access to all of the incentives for energy upgrades. Would this qualify?
That might be on the fringe, but I would definitely submit that as a recommendation. That's an interesting point. The population of Corvallis, isn't that
50, I think it's 59,000, too big?
it probably is. I think it was 35,000 or under, and Corvallis may have got
Okay.
a direct grant from the federal level.
Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be the first stop.
Okay.
I can confirm that Corvallis is applicable to apply directly to the Department of Energy. Corvallis has an allocation of 122,590.
Thanks, Emily. That
Okay.
helps a lot.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing hands raised. I haven't been able to do that for some reason, but if there's other comments you want to make in the chat, that'd be helpful.
There are. I was just going to check with Stacy to make sure all of the hand raised were answered first.
I think so. Natalie, did you re-raise your hand or is that just left up?
Yeah, I actually raised my hand again.
Okay.
I was curious, are we allowed to, one concern that I would have, and that's always a concern, is just for these smaller jurisdictions, we don't necessarily have the staff capacity to implement programs. Are you open to local jurisdictions working with utility partners in implementation of these programs? For example, if we were to partner with PGE on something, would we still be eligible for grant funds?
That would be the case.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we've got a couple of questions here in the chat. A question about accessing the presentation and online webinar recording. How soon will folks be able to access that?
Well, I think Emily has indicated that this will be up on our website, the recording of this, tomorrow, and I sure hope it will be, but maybe give it one more day even. So very quickly, actually.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And the slide deck is already there if you want to review that. I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's awesome. We got another question here in the chat. It reads, it seems the priority programming, green energy scores, EV chargers, etc., do not seem to have much of an EJ lens or are easily focused on at-risk communities. How do you plan to address the large percent required for those folks?
That's why we are reaching out across the state. We've invited numerous jurisdictions, in fact, 225 jurisdictions across the state, which would include disadvantaged communities in rural sections of the state. So that's our way of reaching out, and we will continue to do that through community-based organizations and like to reach out to those communities that may not have heard the word.
Great, thanks, Roger. We've got another question here about what are the possible limits on grant awards for any one entity?
At this point, we're looking at a minimum of 50,000 and a maximum of 100,000. You can see where we're trying to put some refinement around the program because there's a limited amount of money and a whole bunch of cities. If you divided the 1.4 million by 225 cities, you'd end up with about $5,000 a piece, which wouldn't probably do a whole lot of good to any one city. So we're trying to confine the program to a $50,000 and $100,000 maximum, and open to any other ideas that you feel may be better.
I'm just waiting here. Maybe some fingers are typing. But that was the round of questions so far.
Actually, I think we have one more from Tim Lynch, and I will go ahead and unmute you now.
So again, I'm Tim Lynch from Multnomah County. Would we be able to apply, not having a direct allocation because those went to the city of Portland and to Gresham, would we be able to apply for projects for our unincorporated areas or smaller communities, Troutdale, Wood Village, and other communities that that wouldn't have a direct allocation? Could we do projects essentially in those areas as an applicant?
Absolutely, Tim. Thanks for the question. It is a bit confusing when Multnomah County is big and has a lot of cities in it that have smaller populations. Those folks are eligible, so get the word out to them. We'll do our best to do the same.
Could we be the applicant essentially to serve those communities as well?
Emily, you'd be the best to answer that. I don't think so, but
I believe that the answer could be, we might need to do a little bit of research on this, but I believe that the answer could be yes, given the fact that Multnomah County wasn't eligible for a direct award, and the formula application that they came up with there is a little bit complicated in that essentially what they did was took the population. Obviously, we know Multnomah County is a large county, but they took the populations of the largest cities out of the equation. And, as you already know, Portland got a direct allocation. And so what you're left with there in terms of population of the county is much smaller. And so that leads me to believe, and like I said, we'll follow up on this, but that you would be potentially eligible for a sub-award as long as possibly those sub-award funds weren't spent in the areas that already received a direct award, like Portland.
Yeah, that would be the intent, is basically serving the rest of the county that would be otherwise ineligible. So
yeah,
that's great. Can I follow up with you, Emily, just to make sure that's clear?
Absolutely.
It is convoluted. Yeah.
Absolutely, great question.
Good
Thanks
thinking.
so much. Appreciate it.
All right, any other questions? Any other hands raised?
There is another hand raised. Yes. Stacy, could you unmute AJ?
AJ, you're unmuted.
This is AJ. I asked the question earlier about the possible limits, but based on the comment earlier from Multnomah County, are council of governments also allowed to submit proposals for smaller communities within their jurisdictions?
Emily, can you answer that one?
Can you just clarify, AJ, Council of Governments meaning like a consortium?
So the Council of Governments, there's, I believe, 11 in Oregon that are usually overseeing multiple counties, and within those counties, you have several small municipalities. They're usually their purview is very similar to economic development districts, and they do act as intergovernmental agencies who help smaller communities with things such as planning and, you know, in this case, grant writing and other services.
Okay. From the sounds of it, I think that it's possible. Again, I'm going to follow up on that one with you, AJ, so I can get some more clarification. But as long as those entities in that consortium or in that council aren't already eligible for direct awards, it sounds like it might be possible.
Thanks, AJ. Angela, any other hands raised?
No, we got a thank you in the chat. But yeah, I'm not seeing any hand raised at this moment. No more chats.
And you can always check our website too for the information here. You never want to lose our contact information or the comment portal website. So feel free to email us, call us, however. Keep in touch, get in touch. We'll give it 30 more seconds and I think we'll call the end of the webinar. But we certainly appreciate all your participation. Like to get to know more about your jurisdictions and your motivations, how we can help. Oregon Department of Energy is here to help you. Emily, or Angela, or Tony, do you have any other questions or any comments you want to make?
We gotten some thank yous in the chat here. So just wanted to let the team know that. But yeah, what Roger said, don't let this be the end of the conversation. Stay in touch, and that's going to be the best way for all these programs to be developed to fit your needs.
And apologies at the beginning for technical difficulties.
Yes, those still happen.
They do. All right, everybody. I think it's time to bid adieu for today, and I hope everyone here has a wonderful afternoon in this sunny spring weather we're having. Thank you for attending. Bye now.
Thank you all.